Greetings, travelers of the abyss, and welcome to another journey through the dark and mysterious worlds of Lovecraft. Today, we're sharing a tale that might be the most unsettling and terrifying we've ever talked about here. The story is called The Temple, and it's seen as a prelude to another famous work, The Call of Cthulhu, which we'll bring to the channel in the future. But for now, let's focus on this fascinating and eerie story. It all starts with a man who, knowing he's about to die, writes down everything that happened to him. He seals his story in a container and throws it into the ocean, as he was aboard a submarine when it all happened. This manuscript is later found washed up on the shores of Yucatan. When it's read, it reveals a horrifying and mysterious tale. Let's get into it. The Temple, written by Howard Phillips Lovecraft in 1920, begins with the subtitle, Manuscript Found on the Coast of Yucatan. The story introduces Karl Heinrich, an officer in the German Imperial Navy, and his captain, Krapf von Altberg Ehrenstein. Both are aboard the submarine U-129, a vessel that becomes the setting for a series of eerie and terrifying events. It all starts on June 16, 1917, during a mission to destroy a British ship called the Victor. The submarine fires torpedoes at its target, hitting it at coordinates 45 degrees 16 N, 28 34 W. As the British ship begins to sink, the crew is ordered to document the event, filming the destruction. The British sailors abandon ship and climb into lifeboats, but the crew of the U-129 is instructed to eliminate all survivors. With ruthless precision, they destroy the lifeboats, leaving no one alive. After the attack, the submarine dives and spends hours submerged. When it surfaces again, the crew makes a strange discovery. A drowned British sailor is found clinging to the railings of the submarine. His lifeless face is frozen in an expression of pure terror. Although baffled by how the body could have gotten there, the crew assumes it is simply one of the survivors from the Victor. However, when they search the sailor's belongings, they find something unusual, a small ivory statuette. The figure, carved with strange and unrecognizable details, unsettles the crew. One of the officers keeps it, dismissing its odd appearance as meaningless. The body is thrown overboard, but as it hits the water, something shocking happens. One of the sailors, Miller, claims to see the corpse open its eyes and swim away at an unnatural speed. His crewmates dismiss this as a hallucination, but Miller is visibly shaken. That night, the atmosphere aboard the U-129 grows tense. Many of the crew members report having vivid, disturbing dreams. Miller, in particular, becomes increasingly agitated, claiming to see dead faces staring at him through the submarine's windows, something impossible given their depth below the surface. Miller's behavior spirals out of control. He begins shouting and ranting about ghosts and curses, frightening the rest of the crew. In an attempt to restore discipline, the officers punish him severely, using physical force to silence his outbursts. However, Miller's warnings about the ivory statuette being cursed and the submarine being followed by the dead leave a lingering sense of unease among the crew. Over the next few days, the situation worsens. Other sailors begin to exhibit similar symptoms: paranoia, nightmares, and strange behavior. 2 crew members fall seriously ill, and whispers spread that the ivory statuette is behind their misfortune. Some claim it is cursed, while others dismiss the idea as superstition. The tension on board reaches a breaking point when a few sailors disappear without explanation. In the confined quarters of the submarine, there is no logical way they could have vanished, leading to fears that they may have opened the hatches and stepped into the crushing depths of the ocean. By now, panic has set in. The officers struggle to maintain control as the crew begins to lose their grip on reality. 2 more sailors descend into madness, screaming about the statuette and a curse that is dragging the submarine and its crew toward destruction. The once disciplined U-129 is now a vessel consumed by fear, its crew slowly unraveling under the weight of unseen forces. What started as a straightforward mission has turned into a nightmare. The submarine, its crew, and the cursed artifact appear to be connected to something far greater and far darker than they could have imagined. As Karl Heinrich documents the unfolding chaos, he realizes that this is not just a string of strange coincidences. Something ancient and incomprehensible is at work, and there may be no escape. The following week brought even more problems among the crew. Several members were reported to have committed suicide, although no bodies were ever found aboard the submarine. Considering how small the vessel was, the only logical explanation was that they had opened the airlocks and stepped into the crushing depths of the ocean, meeting their ends under the immense pressure. As days turned into weeks, the situation deteriorated further. The U-129, already on a mission to intercept and destroy a transatlantic ship called the Asia, found itself unable to carry out its orders. The crew, demoralized by illness, paranoia, and the growing list of suicides, eventually abandoned their objective. While navigating deeper waters, they encountered a strange underwater current, one that wasn't marked on any navigation charts. The crew decided to follow the current, hoping to save fuel and gain speed. But disaster struck. An explosion in the engine room left the submarine completely inoperative. This catastrophic failure added to the crew's despair, as it jeopardized not only the oxygen systems, but also their ability to ascend from the ocean depths. Trapped in the darkness, they could do nothing but drift with the relentless current. By July 2nd, the crew spotted an American warship on the surface. Many of the remaining sailors saw this as their chance to surrender, hoping to be taken as prisoners of war and escape the submarine's seemingly inevitable doom. However, the German officers refused to consider this option, driven by their pride and unwillingness to yield. This decision sparked a violent mutiny. Shots were fired, and nearly all of the crew perished in the ensuing chaos. Only 2 individuals remained alive: Karl Heinrich, the narrator, and another officer, Klingner. The submarine, now unsteerable, sank even deeper into the ocean, pulled along by the uncharted current. Heinrich and Klingner attempted to regain some control, trying to bring the vessel back to the surface, but their efforts were futile. The current was too strong, and the submarine continued its descent. With each passing day, Klingner grew increasingly unstable. Like Miller before him, he became obsessed with the strange ivory statuette found earlier. He spent hours staring at it, murmuring incoherent phrases and occasionally shouting incomprehensible words, much to Heinrich's growing unease. Eventually, the submarine reached the ocean floor. As Heinrich peered through the windows, he saw a vast plain covered in seaweed and other marine debris. Many of the objects appeared gelatinous at first glance, but Heinrich later concluded they must have been the remains of other vessels that had met their end in these depths. It wasn't long before the 2 men noticed something even stranger. The seabed was dotted with towering pillars, their arrangement seemingly deliberate. Unlike the chaotic wreckage, these structures appeared to follow a kind of artificial logic, as if they had been purposefully placed there by an unknown intelligence. Klingner claimed to see symbols etched into the pillars, though their meaning was beyond his comprehension. These carvings seemed to push Klingner further into madness, leaving him muttering about things Heinrich dared not ask about. Then, something truly unexplainable occurred. A pod of dolphins appeared, swimming alongside the submarine. This in itself was extraordinary, as no known dolphin species could survive at such depths, or endure the immense pressures of the ocean floor. The dolphins seemed almost supernatural, their movements deliberate, as if they were guiding the submarine to a specific destination. The sight left Heinrich both awestruck and deeply unsettled, unable to reconcile what he was witnessing with the laws of nature. In the midst of the underwater current, Klingner began to scream uncontrollably, consumed by a frenzy that shattered any remnants of sanity. His words were chaotic, but he kept repeating with desperation, "He is calling! We have to go! He wants us to follow!" These phrases echoed in the oppressive silence of the submarine as Karl Heinrich watched him with a mixture of fear and confusion. Heinrich didn't understand who Klingner was referring to, but as he observed him compulsively touching the ivory statuette, he feared the worst. Klingner's madness was not just apparent, it was growing. Finally, Klingner made a decision that defied all logic. He opened the submarine's hatch, completely ignoring Heinrich's warnings and the imminent danger. The ocean's pressure destroyed him instantly, tearing his body into countless fragments. Without any protective suit, he had thrown himself into what he called the whisper, a call that only he seemed able to hear. Horrified, Heinrich realized that Klingner's death had removed an internal threat to the already fragile stability of the submarine. After Klingner's death, Heinrich found himself completely alone, trapped in a submarine at the mercy of the depths. As the current continued to drag him, Heinrich began to make out shapes beyond the gloom. The first thing he saw was a vast trench on the ocean floor, an abyss that seemed bottomless. The submarine's lights began to illuminate structures that could not possibly be natural. Blocks with sharp angles rose among the sand and algae, suggesting a deliberate design, as though someone, or something, had built them in unimaginably ancient times. As the submarine descended further, the dolphins that had previously accompanied the vessel began to behave strangely. These creatures, which somehow endured the crushing pressure of the deep, now seemed to guide the submarine toward a specific point within the abyss. Heinrich, unable to understand how they could survive in such conditions, couldn't shake the feeling that these animals served a purpose beyond the natural world. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the dolphins vanished into the darkness, leaving the submarine completely alone. Finally, the submarine reached the ocean floor. Heinrich saw that he had arrived at the heart of something far more immense, a submerged city with gigantic avenues and monumental ruins. The structures featured angular shapes and colossal proportions, evoking a civilization that must have existed long before any known human record. For a brief moment, Heinrich thought he might have discovered Atlantis, but he quickly dismissed the idea. There was something about these ruins that was too strange, too alien, to belong to any legend he had ever heard of. As he peered through the submarine's window, Heinrich saw a series of imposing statues depicting humanoid figures holding strange objects. Their poses suggested a veneration of a radiant and unknown being. The statues seemed to tell a story, one that Heinrich couldn't fully decipher, but it was clearly tied to the worship of a forgotten god, one absent from any human history book. It was evident that this city wasn't just a settlement, it was a massive temple. Heinrich realized that the core of this structure was hollow, filled with tunnels and caverns that extended even deeper into the abyss. Determined to explore and understand what he had found, Heinrich donned a high-pressure diving suit and prepared to leave the submarine. As he gazed at the submerged avenues, one thought filled his mind. He would be the first man to walk these ruins, the witness to a lost civilization beyond any known myth. Heinrich eventually noticed an enormous gate that appeared to guard the city. The gate, partially carved into the surrounding rock, was heavily weathered, its surface cracked and worn, but its sheer size and presence were undeniable. It was clear that the gate had once served as the primary entrance to whatever lay within the city's heart. Though its original purpose was lost to time, Heinrich felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if it were calling him. Determined to uncover the secrets hidden beyond, Heinrich equipped his high-pressure diving suit and exited the submarine. With slow, deliberate steps, he approached the ruins, feeling the crushing weight of the ocean pressing against him. Each time he ventured out, he meticulously documented what he saw: towering statues, angular structures, and symbols etched into the stone. These carvings didn't resemble any known human language, and their meaning eluded him, but they gave him the unsettling feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The gate itself was ajar, just wide enough to reveal a dark corridor descending into the depths. The sight unsettled Heinrich, but his curiosity outweighed his fear. Over the next few days, he made repeated trips between the submarine and the ruins, each time delving further into the city. He described the ruins as unnervingly precise, their angles too perfect to be the result of nature. His notes suggested the existence of a highly advanced civilization, one far older than any human record. The submarine's systems continued to fail. First, the lights flickered and dimmed, making each trip back from the ruins more treacherous. Then, the batteries finally died, plunging the submarine into complete darkness. Heinrich, now surrounded by the oppressive silence of the ocean floor, realized his time was running out. He sat alone in the pitch-black interior of the submarine, fully aware that no rescue would come. The realization of his impending death weighed heavily on him, amplified by the crushing depths and the immeasurable tons of water above. It was during this period of despair that Heinrich saw something unexpected: a faint green light emanating from within the temple. The glow pulsed rhythmically, growing stronger with each passing moment. As Heinrich stared, transfixed, a new sensation overcame him. He began to hear sounds. Despite the submarine being completely sealed and soundproof, chants echoed in his mind. The melody was both beautiful and terrifying, carrying a quality that felt alien and incomprehensible. It wasn't just sound, it was as if the chants bypassed his ears entirely and resonated directly in his thoughts. Convinced he had to investigate further, Heinrich made a final decision. He recorded everything he had experienced so far, describing the green light, the chance, and the indescribable sense of being drawn toward the temple. He placed the manuscript into a sealed container, ensuring it would survive, even if he did not. Then, he donned his suit one last time and stepped out into the darkness. As he approached the temple, the light grew brighter, illuminating his surroundings. The path leading into the temple was flanked by massive statues, their forms humanoid but distorted, as if influenced by aquatic features or something entirely alien. The carvings along the walls glowed faintly, seemingly pulsing in harmony with the green light. Heinrich felt a connection between the temple and the ivory statuette he had carried with him, as though the object were a piece of a much larger puzzle. The gate opened further as he approached, revealing a vast hollow chamber within the temple. Heinrich's last recorded words suggest he felt compelled to enter, unable to resist the pull of the chance and the light. What he encountered beyond the gate remains unknown, as his manuscript ends abruptly. The only certainty is that Heinrich never returned to the submarine. Heinrich's findings suggest the ruins weren't merely the remains of a lost city, but rather a temple built to contain something. The green light, the chants, and the statuette all point to the presence of an ancient, powerful entity, possibly a god like Azul, imprisoned deep beneath the ocean. The glyphs Heinrich observed likely served as warnings or invocations left by an ancient civilization that worshipped or feared this being. The chants Heinrich heard were likely a psychic projection, a method often associated with Lovecraftian deities to lure and manipulate mortals. The connection between the ivory statuette and the temple suggests the statuette may have been a fragment of the seal keeping the entity contained. As Heinrich ventured closer, the influence of the entity grew stronger, eventually compelling him to enter the temple and, presumably, release whatever was inside. Having reached the end of the tale, it's time to unravel its message and delve into the layers of meaning Lovecraft wove into this haunting story. The Temple is one of Lovecraft's most gripping tales, not just for its eerie atmosphere, but for the way it masterfully transitions from a personal account of survival to a broader meditation on humanity's place in an indifferent universe. The story begins with a very human setting, a World War I submarine, and slowly spirals into an otherworldly nightmare. By the end, the reader isn't just left wondering what happened to Heinrich, but questioning the thin veil of reality itself. What makes the Temple so effective is how Lovecraft uses Heinrich's journey to peel back layers of human arrogance. Heinrich starts as a proud officer of the German Imperial Navy, a man deeply rooted in discipline and the belief in order. He's a figure of control and confidence, someone who views his surroundings, whether the ocean or his crew, as things to be commanded. But as the story progresses, the universe around him doesn't just resist his control, it completely ignores him. The ocean, vast and ancient, becomes a mirror for Heinrich's own irrelevance. Lovecraft doesn't need to scream this idea at us. It seeps into every moment of Heinrich's increasingly desperate attempts to impose reason on the incomprehensible. The discovery of the sunken city is where the story shifts gears. At first, Heinrich sees it as a triumph, believing he might have uncovered the legendary Atlantis. But the architecture, the glowing glyphs, and the ominous green light quickly transform this wonder into dread. The city isn't a monument to human achievement. It's a warning of how little we know about the universe. The very act of exploring it feels like trespassing, as if Heinrich is an intruder in a place where humanity was never meant to tread. Lovecraft doesn't fill the story with monsters or graphic horror. Instead, he lets the oppressive weight of the unknown do all the work. And then there's the temple itself, the story's centerpiece. It's not just a ruin, it's a prison, a gateway, or perhaps something far worse. Lovecraft hints that the being sealed within, possibly Azul or a proto-Cthulhu figure, exists far beyond human comprehension. This entity doesn't need to appear physically. Its influence is felt in the way it invades Heinrich's mind, compels him toward the temple, and ultimately consumes him. The psychic chants and the green light aren't just eerie. They're a reminder that the laws of reality, as we know them, are fragile. By the time Heinrich disappears into the temple, the reader is left with the unsettling realization that what he found was never meant to be understood, let alone encountered. And so, we reach the end of this chilling tale. If you've enjoyed unraveling the mysteries of Lovecraft and want to dive deeper into the realms of cosmic horror, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore, and together, we'll continue venturing into the unknown. Until next time, travelers of the abyss,